today's review is about the Bourjois Radiance Reveal Concealer, and the reason why I'm going to talk right now about this concealer is first because, as you saw with my last reviews, I ran out with my concealers, the Tarte one and the Maybelline one, so I wanted to give another go to a different brand. This is the brand that I've chosen. It's a French brand, and I always used to have their eyeshadows, which are really nice and so gorgeous in color. So now I thought, well, why not? You haven't tried a concealer or foundation from them, so I'm going with the concealer. It's perfect timing. And as well, my under eye area is pretty much a little bit more bluish, darkish, and also it has some purple in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on one side how the concealer performs on its own and also what the finish will be. And on the other side, I'm going to use a color correcting concealer at first and then put this one on top, so that we have both sides where you can compare how strong the coverage is and also how it will apply. So let's get started. So I'm going to apply the concealer on its own on this side, and as you can see, it has a doe foot applicator, which is really nice and easy to apply. And this is basically your applicator, and later on you can blend it with a brush or with a sponge. Now I'm in the shade Ivory, and it's the 01. They have in total 3 different shades, so it's 01, 02, or 03, which for me personally, they could have brought out a little bit more shades so that everyone could use them. Doesn't matter what your skin color is and also what your skin texture basically is, because it will work and it looks beautiful at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a bit right here where I really need it, and this is now one layer, and I'm also going to apply it, like blend it out with a sponge as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab it and blend it into the skin, and it's definitely a little bit more liquidish and also lighter than, like when it comes to the texture and also finish, than the Tarte one or the Maybelline one. I personally find that the Maybelline and the Tarte one are very thick in texture, and they're also more mattifying, whereas this concealer is very light. It has, I would say, less coverage, but it's definitely not drying. So if you have dry under eye area, then I definitely would say this one from all the 3 that I've just mentioned is the best one for dry under eye areas, and it also will look very natural because it's only a very light layer because of the texture. It's more like a liquidish texture rather than a very thick creamy texture. So now that you see how this one performs, and it's so easy to blend because it's more liquidish and it also blends into the skin perfectly, you can set it now with some translucent powder. That's what I'm going to do at the end so that you will see the result as well. But if you have very mature skin and you have fine lines around your eye area, then I always would recommend to use less, because then it won't settle into your lines. Or what you also can do is, if you blend it into the skin and it hasn't creased yet, because every concealer will crease because of the lines, then make sure that you're going to blend it in again so that there's no creasing, and then use the powder on top so that it's definitely drying out this area so that it won't get sucked into your little lines. So you can prevent creasing if you're going to handle directly with translucent powder. And if you have a drier under eye area, because this one is a little bit more liquidish, use less powder. You don't have to bake, just use less powder. Now I'm going to move on this side as well, and I'm going to start off with the color correcting concealer. Now let's move on to the color correcting part at first. So as you can see, I've been using the orangey part a lot, and this is just because of my blue and purpley areas that I can get under my eyes. So it depends on how much stress I have, it will show up, and sometimes it reduces from itself. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the Ben Nye color correcting concealer wheel, and I'm also going to use the Zoe concealer buffer brush, because this just works the best. And after that I'm going to use the normal concealer on top. So what I've done is I digged into the orangey concealer because blue and orange will neutralize each other, and I'm going to keep it at the very inner corner of my eye area because this is where I mainly need it. I'm going to blend it with the finger. Make sure that you're not using a lot of it, because you need to cover it up later on with the normal concealer as well. And I also would recommend using a brush later on and dust some translucent powder on top. Now the brush that I'm going to use is the Luxe Powder Fusion brush from Zoefa, and it's a really nice and small, tiny, fluffy brush, and it's perfect for the under eye area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load it with some translucent powder, and I'm going to apply this on the concealed area. The reason why I love to do this is so that it won't move when I'm going to apply the other concealer on top. And by the way, I'm not going to use a lot of translucent powder, just a tiny bit, so that it will stick to the area that I wanted to like cover up with the color correcting concealer. So now that we have this one on, we can go in with the Bourjois Radiance concealer again, and we are going to put this one on top. Make sure that you're not going to use too much, but just that it's enough to cover up the concealed area, like the color correcting concealed area. So I'm going to apply this one as well, and I'm going to use the Beauty Blender as well to blend it. And I'm just making sure that it's nice and even. Of course, I don't have any foundation on, so I'm only using now the concealer, so that you're able to see how much coverage the concealer will give you. And then once you have the foundation on and then you're going to use the concealer, then you will you can tell by the video then if this is enough coverage for you or not. Or if you have very dry eyelids, if you're going to use it or not. Because for the moment it's definitely not drying. The Tarte one, I know it's very drying. So if you have problems with the Tarte one, then this one will definitely work for you because it's more liquidish and it also will give you more of an highlighting dewy finish. So once this is on, we can go back to the comparison. So here you can see what the concealer can look on its own and also what it will look like if you're using the color correcting concealer underneath. Now, to be honest, it depends on how I personally feel and also how my skin reacts. I personally really like it when I don't have a lot of blueness, but I can use concealer on its own. It's enough for me. It will brighten my area and it also gives me more of a lifted and dewy finish rather than a drying matte finish. If I'm having a lot of blueness going on, as for today, then I'm also preferring to use a color correcting concealer underneath and then go with this one on top, just to make sure that there isn't any darkness anymore. And it just depends on your personal preference. If you find that the Tarte one or the Maybelline one can be too drying for you, then I definitely would recommend the Bourjois concealer because it isn't as drying, but the coverage is also a bit it's a less coverage. It's not a full coverage concealer, but it definitely will lift and also give you a nice and refreshing feeling. I also love to use the concealer on top of my eyelids, and this is where it's enough for me. It just brightens my eye area and I'm feeling way more awake, and I also look way more awake than if I would go out without a concealer. Now, this is my personal preference on how I like to work with the concealer. If you want to have a concealer that does everything right away, make sure that you're also having a concealer that has the right undertone. It depends on if you have dark circles or not. Otherwise, if you have no problems with any dark circles, then go with the concealer on its own. It always depends on, I can't remember, I can't really think of a concealer where you don't need to use a color correcting concealer underneath if you have a lot of struggles with your under eye area. You always have to use a color correcting concealer underneath if it's very strong and if you have a struggle with it. Otherwise, go without it. This is just my personal opinion, preference and experience that I had when it comes to the under eye area itself. Now, when it comes to covering up some little spots, this definitely will work. What I can show you is, for example, with the pimple right here, it's a bit red. I'm going to use the concealer on its own. I'm also going to use the Beauty Blender to blend it. And it's alright, it covers it up. And now I have no foundation on, so if I have foundation on and I would cover up some little spots, this will definitely be enough. But most of the time you want to use the foundation right under your eyes, so you're going to skip this part and you're using the concealer on this area only. And this is why I personally don't mind if I'm using a color correcting concealer underneath or not. So I hope that you liked this video, I hope that you enjoyed this video and also could learn about the concealer itself and also how to use it. I personally really like it because it's definitely not drying. That's one of my favorite parts. I just would wish they would come out with a lot more shades so that a lot more people would use it, because people are not really talking about it. It's also a French brand, but I love their products, especially their eyeshadows and the concealer as well. And I also definitely would recommend this one to you as well, because it's just really nice and natural. So if you're going for a natural look, this is also the concealer for you. I'm more that natural type of person, that's why I also like it. So I hope that you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon in the next one. Bye!